Hello there and welcome here at Professor Herman Manyora's channel. My name is Simon Irungu, and if it's your first time here, feel free to join in the family. How do you join the family? Just click the subscribers button. And okay, so Professor, today I'm not going to be having a question for today, but we're going just to be looking at the administration of the Jubilee government. How do you interpret, how do you say they have performed?
You know, there are two ways of looking at the performance of any government.
Okay.
In my view.
Yeah.
Looking at Moi, Kibaki, Kenyatta 1, Kenyatta 2. Every time you have a new president, they certainly do certain things better.
Yeah.
In other words, they move forward. So Moi moved forward the country from 1978.
Okay.
There was a period of stagnation and excesses and everything else. Kibaki took over and moved the country forward. Uhuru took over and he has moved the country forward. That you can't deny. But the other way you can look at it is there anything major? Is there anything revolutionary? Is there anything transformational?
Okay.
Are we leaping? Are we anywhere near our potential? And the answer is no. None of these people has put us anywhere near our potential. But to maintain so that the country continues moving, we are not stagnating. The country is moving forward. Moving forward. One step at a time. There are people who are okay with that. And if you're okay with the one step at a time, Uhuru has done wonderfully well. But I'm not the kind of guy who looks at one step at a time. I want 10 steps. I want to leap. I want the bar. We must raise our bar. This country, people are living like we should be living in the 17th century.
Okay.
We are living like animals. So if I were to use that yardstick, then I'll say we have not had a president who can take us where we should be.
So what you're saying is basically he would have done more.
He could do, but within the confines of one step at a time.
Yeah.
Developmental, incremental, evolving. He's done perfectly well.
Okay.
Very well.
Now let's look at the big four agendas.
Yes.
Let's start with food security. How has the performance been on that sector?
You see, that's what I'm saying.
Okay.
Any of these things, if you look at them in terms of an incremental move, a step forward, they are doing things about food security.
So basically they're just making baby steps.
Yeah, baby steps. Yeah, they are good. They are baby steps, but they are steps nevertheless. They are measures they are put in place to ensure there's food security. There are irrigation projects ongoing. There are regulations in the tea sector, in the coffee sector. There are things to help maize farmers. And there are policies put in place. And there are efforts to do one or two other things to ensure we have food in the country. But that's just that. I want a transformational thing. That's what Uhuru has not done.
Okay. Okay, and on affordable housing, every time we talk about housing in Kenya, you seem to be very bitter about the slums and people still living in slum, even after very many years of independence. What can you say about that?
You see,
can they
again,
do better on housing?
One step at a time, the country moving forward, but one step at a time. Uhuru has explained this. I said, okay, we wanted to do so many units per year. Maybe we were too ambitious. But basically, one, I've heard that thing, Waita or whatever is explaining. One thing is, there were teething problems in terms of how to implement.
Okay.
And there were even the people who went to court. I think it's court which went to court. Because employers were to pay certain amounts of money to deduct from their workers and top up that amount in the manner we do NHIF and I think NSSF or things of that nature. I think pension and things and I think NSSF and whatever. So the employers were not happy. They went to court. The trade unions were also not happy. They went to court. So that delayed the government in terms of this housing thing. But they have also explained you must see success not just in the houses themselves, but at the same time they point at housing projects. Of course, in terms of numbers, they are far below the stated 500,000, but there are projects going. But they're explaining and saying the big achievements is in putting measures in place, in putting the necessary legislation, the necessary policy framework, establishing the machinery to ensure that the roll-off will be seamless. That's what they have explained. And I have no problem with that. But again, that is in the usual incremental step by step. If it is Manyora, it's radical.
Okay.
I say within 5 years, there shall be no slum in Kenya.
Okay.
The poorest housing in Kenya will be Buruburu. That will be my slum if I'm the president.
Okay. And so,
but that thinking is not for kawaida. Mine is a radical way of looking at things.
Visionary.
Yeah, looking at 100 years, 200 years.
Okay.
What will Kenya be in the next 50 years? That's my way of looking at things. And I'm saying Manyora being president, after 10 years, you cannot believe you are in Nairobi. This will be like London.
Okay, since we are in the last lap of the Jubilee government is in its last lap,
yes.
How capable was it to ensure that people are living in very good places and good housing?
It's possible. There's nothing difficult.
How capable were they?
They are very capable. There's no problem. In fact, they are not even touching those things you need to touch to make Kenyans live well, to have houses. They are not talking about that. The first thing you need to do is to apply the municipal law that applies across the world. In other words, land in a city or a town or a municipality is never for sale.
Okay.
Land has to be allocated for development. You cannot buy land in Nairobi. You shouldn't buy land. You shouldn't sell land in Nairobi. All land in Nairobi must be for specific development. You are allocated by the city of Nairobi, by the government. And then you develop. You are given a period. If that period elapses before you develop, it reverts back to the allocating authority. You don't sell it to Rose. You get it?
Okay. Rose is behind there.
Yes, that girl behind. You don't sell it to her.
Yeah.
You don't hold the land for speculative purposes. All people who are allocated land in Nairobi have sold it and sold it and sold it. So that's the first thing you address. Once you address that, the rest just falls in place. And then there are so many places around in Nairobi. You move the city from the city. If you are in Ngong, there's a road being built, I think, between somewhere in Ngong, Kimuka, all the way to Mai. Look at that space. There was no human being there. It could be traditional community land, but government can enter into agreement with the Maasai, the owners. You move Nairobi there. Look at Thika, people planting pineapples in town, and you are talking about housing.
So they can be allocated
You allocated them good, fertile land to grow pineapples. You develop you take a rail line there if you need. Take an airstrip there or an airport. Let them do like Rea Vipingo, Ukombali, Wanapanda, Makonge. You don't bring pineapples in town. You don't plant trees in Thika town. So these are the things government would do if Manyora was the president. You only do those things and the rest falls in place.
Okay. Mr. Manyora, from independence, from independence, there is no administration that has been able to fulfill its promise to the youth. The youth have been suffering from unemployment over the years. Even the Jubilee government, that's why we are seeing the aspirants of 2022 election still promising creation of jobs to the younger people. What can you say about this? You
see, the problem of youth employment is a global phenomenon. It affects every country. Africa is both fortunate and unfortunate. We have the youngest population in the world. This is both a blessing and a curse, depending on how you work out. If you just sleep, it is a curse. If you make use of the population, countries like Japan will do everything to have our population, youthful population. So these guys are so lucky they are sitting on it. Now, the missing link in Africa, let's talk about Kenya, is education. The education we inherited from Mzungu was to produce clerks. We are maintaining the same education. Just how many clerks would an economy need? Only absorb so many clerks. So everybody we produce is like the Mzungu clerk that was being produced to help the Mzungu do whatever he was doing. We have not moved to producing schools are not producing thinkers.
Okay.
They are not producing people who create jobs. We are producing people who go and look for jobs. Okay. The most absurd situation occurred in the late 1970s and 1980s when the country developed. We call them village polytechnics. They later said the word was so bad. I remember my father was a manager, one of this, my late father, Mzee Moja, God rest his soul.
Okay. They
then changed to youth polytechnics. So here you are. You train young people, wonderful polytechnics, across the country those days, in the 80s, early 80s. Now, they were well funded by ILO, by European Union, but there's a lot of funding. Now, so Jadel Kebiro goes to some polytechnic somewhere. He learns to be a carpenter. Upon graduation, he was given a full kit, the kit a carpenter needs. You know, randa, nini, yote anapewa. Kama ni mason, anapewa kabiro na kila kitu anapewa. Automobile engineering, those who are doing a bit of repairing of, they are given the kit, spanner box, toolbox. You know what they did? They took that toolbox, anawaacha kwa nyumba ya mama yake, anapanda anakuja Nairobi. Okay. Kutafuta kazi. Sio kama tunaelewana? Another mistake that was visible, and this has been documented. Instead of them putting on aprons and overalls, they began putting on uniform like secondary school students. White. Now when mechanic. You see the mentality I'm talking about?
Yeah.
So we have never been able to address anything seriously. That shows you our education, even when we attempt to put up polytechnics and technical institutes, they are misplaced, finally. It's a question of thinking outside the box. How do you have all these polytechnics in this country, manufacturing things, yet government buys chairs from China? Kibaki tried to stop it. This useless furniture in government offices, if they were produced by our polytechnic, every young man will want to go and train to be a carpenter. You get it? All the beds, how many children are in boarding schools?
A lot, many.
Millions, okay?
Yeah.
They use beds. Where do these beds come from? If these beds were actual by a matter of government policy and directive, were all coming from technical institutes, okay, polytechnics, those places will be attractive, will be full of students, and they will be entering the economy as employment creators, not people seeking employment. They will be self-employed, they will employ others. Okay. So it's a question of refocusing our thinking about employment.
So as we come to the end of the show, we can see the fallout of the Jubilee government between the president and the vice president. What can the aspiring administration do to maybe avoid this such circumstance?
Such as which one?
The fallout, maybe where the president and the DP are not in terms.
You know that those are inevitable things in politics. It's not just Kenya. They happen everywhere. I think in Malawi or Zambia, one of those. For a full term, the vice president was running for office, and they was at loggerhead with the president. It happens, but in civilized societies, those differences are not played out in the public. Okay. The only problem and unfortunate thing in this country, they are played out in the public. In Kenya, when that happened, Jaramogi Oginga Odinga was bold enough to resign from government. Okay. Ruto is doing what? He's going through what many deputy vice presidents and deputy presidents go through. Deputy governors, deputy presidents, vice, they go through all that. Even in organizations, even in companies. You know, the deputy is always having problems with the boss. What Ruto has done that is different is to play it out in the public. Okay. But it's nothing strange. You can't avoid friction. Friction is part and parcel of politics. It's only bad when decorum is thrown out, like in the Ruto and the Uhuru situation. But it's normal. We would hope in the next dispensation, people will learn to be much more mature, resolve their differences with their bosses and their juniors, their deputies. Where it is reconcilable, where it's not possible, you be man enough to walk out of government and run your show and avoid what Ruto is doing. Okay, so we are going to call it a wrap at that. Yes. Well, thank you very much for joining us here at the channel. If you have not subscribed to the channel, please make sure you do so. So till we have this conversation again, my name is Simon Irungu.